You want to learn how to write a good short story with no experience. Thankfully, that's not super hard to do. You might be thinking that the first short story that you write doesn't deserve to be good or that it's not possible for it to be good. But thankfully, that's not true. While you may not write the best story ever, you certainly can still write a good story for your first one. So, in this video, I'm going to share with you 4 tips for writing a good story without any experience. The first thing, and arguably the most important, is to take past experiences as inspiration. It's a lot easier to write about what you already know. And there's no reason why you can't write a story using some past experience as inspiration or just structuring your story around an entire past experience that you've had. For example, do you already know what it feels like to lose a best friend over an argument? Do you already know how to escape from a burning building? Do you know how to resist peer pressure? You can take past experiences that you've had, big or small, and apply them to your story to fill in certain parts of the story. You can use it as the entire plot of the story or the themes of the story. You can take your personal experiences and really apply them in a lot of different ways to supplement your story and strengthen it. And it's just 100% true that your story is stronger when you're writing about something that you've already experienced. This isn't just a beginner's tip either. Expert writers continually do this day in and day out, writing about their previous experiences and letting those experiences influence and inform the stories that they're writing. It's part of how you make stories that are fictional as strong as they are, because there's a lot of nonfiction parts that are incorporated into it, usually from experiences that you've had, from your own nonfiction story. So take those past experiences, sit down with yourself for just a minute, and think about some experiences that you've had in your life, certain challenges that you've faced, sad things that have happened, happy things that have happened. You run the gambit. Come up with a list of things that have happened to you that you have done, things that you have created, things that have been destroyed, and write those down. And you can use those to inform your next story and certain aspects of your next story as well. Number 2, and now we're getting more into the actual writing tips, is actions, not words. If there is ever any point in your entire story where you have the option to either communicate something to your reader through actions that your characters are doing or actions happening in the environment of the story, or through words explaining what's happening in the story, always choose to use action. Show, don't tell. Use actions, not words. So, in a situation where I'll just come up with an example. There's a brother and a sister, and they're fighting, and the brother slams the door on his sister, and he goes into his room, and she's left in the hallway starting to cry. There's 2 different ways that you could write that small piece of action out. First, you could say, she was sad that her brother yelled at her and slammed his bedroom door. Or would you rather say, a tear rolled down her cheek as her lips quivered. Her quiet whimpers were drowned out from the loud bang that came from the door he always vanishes behind. Do you see the kind of power that comes from using action in your storytelling as opposed to just explaining what's going on? You can explain with as many awesome and cool words as you want, but in the end, it's never going to be as impactful as just telling the reader what is actually happening in the space and letting them come to the conclusions themselves. The actions will inform the reader what's going on, because your reader, they have social cues and intuitions, and they're smart and can come to conclusions from information just like you can. So if you give the reader that benefit of the doubt and use actions to show what's going on and don't explicitly say every single piece of your story, it's going to be a lot more impactful. The actions that your characters take are going to be a lot more meaningful. And overall, your story is just going to be a lot stronger through it. It won't feel as fluffy. It will feel very straight to the point and strong. Use actions, not words. The third piece of advice that I have is to start writing your story with the end of the story in mind. Now, if this doesn't make a lot of sense, I actually posted a separate video on this as a part of the channel launch of Stories Solved, this channel here. You can check out that video on the title card up here that talks more about how to write a story in a lazy way and still come out with an awesome story, which is through starting with the end in mind. But I'll give you a shorter piece of it here. Starting with the end in mind really is all about making every single one of your actions that your character is taking and having it point in the direction of the end of your story. Now, this doesn't mean that your character literally needs to be moving in the direction of wherever your story is going to physically end the entire time. More so, it's about the actions that your character is taking and the things that they do and the things that they say being relevant and important for the ending of your story. You want to make sure that things that are going on throughout your entire story are going to be informing the reader of that finish at the end, because the payoff will be so drastic and so large. Have you read a story before where you read the ending and went, oh my goodness, I remember when they referenced this all the way back at page 17. How did I not notice it back then? Oh, and you know what? I remember seeing it at page 50 and page 90 and page 123 and page 156. I saw these parts that the author included that was driving the story towards the ending that I didn't notice until now. So when you set up your story like that, it's going to make the payoff at the end a lot greater for your reader, because it shows them that your story the entire time was very strong. It's really, I'll use the word punchy, not necessarily punchy, but just like it was very strong. The actions were important. The actions were relevant. And that to a reader is a great payoff that you can provide to them. And it helps keep your story interesting too, because all your actions are necessary. So your reader's never left wondering, like, oh, well, he likes peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Like, that's good to know. And then it's never brought up again. But you know, if the author or if the character is allergic to peanut butter and then it becomes relevant towards the end of the story, I mean, that's relevant information that is pointing in the direction of the story. Actions don't have to necessarily be pushing us closer to that ending all the time, just as long as it's pointing in the direction of the ending. And you don't need to rigidly stick to the ending that you come up with in your outline either. If you want to change some things around, certainly feel free to do that. You're totally welcome to. Just as long as most of your actions that the characters are taking is pointing in that direction of the end. It'll make your story a lot more impactful. And it also makes your writing process simpler, because after you go through and you write your rough draft, don't think too much about it. Just write your rough draft, get it done and put on paper. After you do that and you go back through your revisions, then there's only one question that you need to answer. Did this action or this dialogue piece or this information point toward the direction of the end of the story? Is it a yes? Then it stays. It doesn't go away. Is it a no? It doesn't point towards the end. You can get rid of it. Simple as that. And if you just follow that one step when it comes to your revisions and writing your story and the way that you structure it, you will find your story being a lot stronger than anything that a lot of people write for their first story without any sort of guidance like this. And finally, the last thing. This one might sound a little sad at first, but just roll with me. You want to constantly make the worst thing that could possibly happen to your character at that moment happen all the time, except for death, of course. You want to make whatever would be the worst thing to happen to that character happen to them. That is extremely important to keep the ball rolling, so to speak. It helps you with writer's block. So if you're not sure what to do next in your story that you're writing, you're not sure how to push yourself towards the end, you just sit back and ask yourself, what would be the worst thing to happen to my character right now while he's eating lunch in the high school cafeteria? What's the worst thing that could happen? A bully comes over, takes his lunch, and slams it in his face. And now his outfit for his school photos is ruined. That's a pretty bad thing if the goal of your character is to get a nice photo. The worst thing that could possibly happen to him, his outfit gets ruined. His hair gets ruined. You have to think about what the worst thing related to your character's goal that could happen to them would be, and you just need to make that happen again and again and again. If I am the character, the worst thing that could happen to me right now as I'm recording this video would be if I went around to my camera to find out that I never started recording and I just talked to nothing for 15, 20 minutes. That would be the worst thing possible to happen to me in this situation. So if you keep that kind of idea in mind, then you'll find that your story is continuing to keep the ball rolling towards the ending, especially if you pair this concept with, starting your story with the end in mind. You'll have an extremely powerful drive behind your story that is making it progress a lot more structured and a lot cleaner than a lot of other stories would. And also, one addendum. I mentioned earlier you want to make the worst thing possible happen aside from death. But, I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't do that as well. If your story is focusing around, a band of characters that are together, a group of 2, 3, maybe 4, and you've got a main character that the story has been told from this entire time, from their perspective, and they happen to get killed in combat, and then your next chapter starts with the perspective of one of the teammates that was with your original main character, then that's the worst thing that could happen to your new main character, the second person that you've now switched perspectives to. Would be their leader dying. So there's a lot of creative ways that you can apply this idea of making the worst thing possible happen to your characters and using it as a motive of driving your story forward. And you don't have to just look at this as a sad thing to happen either. Obviously, the worst thing happening is not going to be a good thing. But you could use this concept in comedies, and comedies do it all the time. You could use it in rom-coms, in horror, in drama, in cowboy western stories. You could use it in anything, and it will be a powerful driver in your story that is leading you towards a conclusive and strong ending. And this topic related to writer's block is actually really, really helpful. And I cover that more in depth along with another strategy for beating writer's block in this video up in the title card that you can click on if you want to check that out as a part of the launch of this channel. So those are my 4 points that I would highly, highly recommend to you if you're starting to write your first short story. You'll find that it helps you beat writer's block a lot faster. You'll find that you'll know what you want to write about. You'll have personal experiences behind it that are backing up your writing. And you've got 2 of the most powerful drivers that make your story so much stronger. Writing with the end in mind and constantly asking yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen to my character? And then making that thing happen. If you use these 4 concepts and put them into place, and especially using actions and not words, your story the entire time will carry itself, and it will have a massive strength that it wouldn't have had otherwise. And again, this video is a part of a launch of this new channel, Stories Solved. It is one of 5 videos. So if you want to check out another one of the videos, like this one right here that goes more into depth on writing your story with the end in mind, telling an awesome story the lazy way, then you can click right here. And be sure to subscribe to the channel for more tips and advice on story writing so that you can strengthen your stories as time goes on through the tips that I'm sharing with you. All I want to do is help, and all I want to do is teach. Thanks for watching.